Welcome to the show, everybody. Michael with CoronavirusDiaries, and today I'm blessed to be able to speak with Joe Cebula, a personal trainer and the co-host of the Maximus Podcast. Joe, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Mike. It's good to see you.
Likewise. So just before we jumped into our session, we were kind of discussing what are we going to chat about today, and it turns out that there's something pretty relevant, a couple things actually, but one of which is as it pertains to business, workflows, interruptions. I'm sharing a little bit about what's going on and how.
We've been fortunate with the Maximus Podcast because during this lockdown, everybody we've ever wanted to interview has been available. And so we've got a nice backlog of episodes. Most of them we've already aired. We only have about a half dozen left. And I was going into my iMac to get the episode for the day, and my iMac will not boot up. And so of 120, 130 episodes of the podcast that we've released so far, there are 5 recordings that are stored locally that weren't backed up to the cloud. And now my computer won't start up. So
how long has the Maximus Podcast been going uninterrupted in terms of
almost 2 years? Time? Yeah, almost 2 years. We've never missed a beat.
So how is so what are your thoughts then?
Well, this is the price of relying on technology, right? You get a little too complacent, and then the technology fails. I guess I'm not one to panic. I'm not going to lose sleep over it. It sucks. I'll do what I can to try to do a data recovery. We've already talked about that a little bit. Figure out what my options are. Once I know, what's going on with it, we'll decide if I need to contact people and re-record. Hopefully they're able and willing to do that.
Sure.
So, you pick up the pieces and you carry forward. We will still have an episode out this week because we always do what we call live. We're just calling the Maximus Podcast live. And it's more of like a topical episode. I can always just say on that episode, by the way, we had another interview that was scheduled for today, but we've had some technical issues, so I'm working to resolve those. So I don't think, in the big picture, it really doesn't affect anything. It just delays what otherwise would have been a fantastic interview.
No doubt.
Very interesting guest. So, it sucks, but if you let these things get under your skin, you'll never get anywhere in life. You gotta be a little tougher than that. And this, I used to work in live TV, so I understand deadlines and working under pressure. My old general manager at the station I worked at, he had a motto, and that was that whatever you do, you want to do it with a relentless sense of urgency. Get it done, because this is live television. We don't have time to second guess ourselves. You gotta push things through.
Yeah.
My fault. I should have been backing these up as we went along. To be fair, though, nobody saw COVID coming, and that changed all the processes. So instead of recording on one platform, we were recording on Zoom, and Zoom stores the files locally, and yada, 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 yada. It was just technically daunting to create a whole new process to back everything up. My fault.
And then you get it working, and it's going along fine. And 4 or 5 episodes is not the end of the world, but
no, it isn't.
The
segue
that we kind of been talking about is it's related and potentially related in income and revenue streams. And let's just say, for example, maybe the Maximus Podcast was generating a little bit that would cover some expenses, your daily expenses or monthly expenses. And then suddenly, there's the potential of that episode not uploading, not getting the ad revenue or whatever, and I'm speculating here, but so the unemployment stuff that we're briefly discussing.
Yeah. So, but before we go into this, I kind of want to lay just a little bit of a foundation, because I feel like unemployment itself is part of a worldview that it's not tenable. It's not sustainable. And that worldview is that whole thing where you're born, you go to preschool, you go to kindergarten, you go to grade school, middle school, high school, you go to college, you get a job, you work for an employer for your entire career, and then you retire with a pension and you live off Social Security. And that's the life, right? That's what you're supposed to do. Yeah. This concept is very modern. It's very new. It's like our parents knew that. Their parents didn't know that. That's not how it worked for
cheese lines during the Great Depression.
Exactly, right? And so our parents, that's kind of what they did. They sort of stuck with 1, maybe 2 employers through their whole career. And then that whole thing has fallen apart. Nobody sticks with one employer anymore. And employers, for the most part, don't even offer pensions. Everything's been outsourced to some third party. And I just don't think that doesn't fit with human nature realistically. For the largest part of humans as an animal, as we've existed, everything's been about survival from moment to moment to moment. So we don't have this like promise of Social Security when we retire. Right. And it's like, well, what is this concept of retiring anyway, right? There's a lady that I know. She was the director of the public library here, and she retired. You know, she got to the point where I was like, okay, time to retire and, you know, live out your golden years.
Is it 65 now, I think? 60.
She might have been 67, you know, somewhere around there. Most people now my retirement specialist, my financial advisor always says 67 is a better age.
And I think for the US, the national average for life expectancy is like 78 now.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting thing. You start adding those years up. But
yeah. So anyway, this lady from the library, she retires, and then she's spending every day at the library because that was her life.
Yeah.
For like 30, 40 years, like everything she did was for that library. Like she wanted to be there. She loves the library now. Instead of working there, she can just use it. But somebody had asked her, like, how's retirement? She said, you know, it's really hard. It's really, really hard. And it's like, well, why did you retire? I mean, if you were happy, you were filling your role, like, where was this pressure coming from that you had to give that up?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you had something else that you had put on hold and you were looking to pursue it, like you'd be pursuing it, but you didn't have that. So like, I don't understand this idea of like, you're done working, you know, society is through with you right now. But COVID has kind of got people doing that. It's like, oh, you're old, retired, and weak. Well, you should just die. We don't need you sucking away everybody else's Social Security benefits. You know, we're not going to wear masks to protect the most vulnerable because, you know, our freedoms, blah, blah, blah. And old people are going to be the ones that die anyway. There's no value in that. So this concept of unemployment has everything to do with you should have a job. You should be working for someone else. And if someone else can't give you a job, well, then society is going to give you this to tide you over until you can get another job. And I have a problem with that just because I've been self-employed now going on, 15 years. I don't like relying on the government to support me. You know what I mean? There's just too much political BS. There's too many people that I don't trust in charge of all of that. And this whole thing with unemployment getting cut by like what, $400 a week right now is a perfect example. If you were relying on this, like, I guess you're just not important. You're like old people who are just going to die anyway. We're going to trim the fat. You don't get to survive. You don't get to pay your mortgages, but don't worry. We'll bail the banks out.
Well, and that was like one of the elements that you kind of mentioned is with a lot of the small businesses, they're having trouble getting people to come back to work because they're making more by not working.
We're losing business. There are lines around the block, but I can't hire anybody for $8.75 an hour because they're getting $600 a week on unemployment.
Yeah.
It's like, well, guess what, Jack Hole? Your job ain't worth $8.75 an hour. Nobody wants to work for single digits.
Right.
Like even a high school kid is looking at your coffee shop and going like, I ain't going to work there for $8.75 an hour.
Is that what, that can't be the minimum. I thought minimum wage was like $13 or something.
It's weird when you get into these different industries where it's like, are you a server or are you an employee? You know what I mean? And so it's like, yeah, nobody's going to come work for you for minimum wage. Nobody wants that anymore. I want something better than a minimum wage job because we know we can't live on a minimum wage job. So if I have the option, I mean, think of it this way. If I have the option to work for you 40 hours a week for minimum wage and not make ends meet, or literally do nothing for 40 hours a week and not make ends meet, I'm going to do nothing. Why would I work for you? There's no opportunity there. There's no growth there. There's no challenge to help me, become a better person. It's just, you're just sucking time out of my life.
You bring up an interesting point, the challenge, right? And to that point, a friend of mine, they were in an industry that was impacted. They received the unemployment with the $600 perk. So combined, because of the industry they're in, they were actually making a little bit more than they would have been making had they been working. And I'm like, so what have you been up to? Are you like searching for a different job, in a different industry? Are you doing some passion projects, or like, what are you doing? Because with me, the first thing I think about is like, well, if I was to be laid off, if I was to be let go, one, sitting around, I would lose my mind. Like I would lose it. I couldn't. Idle hands is the devil's playground, they say.
Yeah.
Dude's like, well, I've been taking, about a month leave of it, like just being on vacation. I'm like, well, what have you been doing? He's like, man, I'm getting really good at these video games. And kind of jokingly, but in the back of my mind, I'm sitting there just like, yeah, like it kind of made me freak out a little bit, thinking like, man, spend a month, like here's a prime opportunity to pursue or seek something, and maybe video, to his.
Look, I like relax. I love video games as much as the next guy, but like, I need something else in my life. If I'm just sitting there, and this is just the classic image of just like pounding down Doritos and drinking Mountain Dew and playing Call of Duty all day. Like, this is not me living my best life. This is me maybe like relaxing on a weekend. This is me like, what? And believe me, I've gotten to the point where it's like, man, I wish I could just take like 2 or 3 days and just dive headfirst into a game and just like kind of go away for a while. That's like a vacation. Yeah, a month. God.
And the thing that I'm
recognizing
right now is there's a lot of people that, when the closeout or the shutdown happened was like late March, early April, a lot of people would have been getting in on the unemployment, and I think it's 6 months. I'm not too sure how long actually you can be on it. I know after I came back from overseas once, I've been on it for a couple months, but got right back into work shortly thereafter. So all these people that, that may potentially be getting very good at video games, and unless they're trying to turn that into some sort of revenue stream or income, come the end of this, suddenly they're going to be out of unemployment and they're not going to have anything to jump into.
Yeah.
They haven't been doing the searching and the hunting, to position themselves. And that positioning, and I know you're familiar with positioning and timing of things. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens. I know, did you read much about the new federal bill they're trying to push through? For
just reading the headlines on it, but I haven't dug into it because it kind of disgusts me.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens here in the coming months. Are you familiar with Robert Kiyosaki, the author of the Rich Dad Poor Dad book?
Yes, yeah.
Was recently listening to some of his stuff, and he's talking about a potential commercial housing or commercial real estate crash, much like.
Oh yeah, I don't think it's something that we can avoid right now, because think of it this way, right? So one of the concerns with cutting people's unemployment is that they can't make rent. They can't make rent. They can't pay mortgages. Right.
That's residential. Yeah.
Even so, the banks haven't done anything to help anybody right now. They've offered furloughs, maybe deferments, you know what I mean? Yeah. But like, it's all these really complicated systems, which if you break down, and this is me speaking as a former housing counselor, even in the negatives, even in these, we're probably going to lose money on this deal. Everything is designed to favor the investors. So you fall behind on your mortgage, 1 month, no big deal. They won't even really say anything. 2 months, you'll get a letter. Hey, you're 2 months behind. 3 months, you don't catch up right now, you're in foreclosure. It's a very, very scary moment for people. The state of Minnesota, the foreclosure process takes 10 months. So it's not like you're going to lose your house after 3 months of missing payments. Like, it's going to be almost a year. And that's assuming that they're going to process it that fast. During the last bubble crash, when everybody was behind on their mortgage, it was taking like 3 years because the courts were so backlogged. And so it was like, dude, you got time. You've got time to figure things out. If you get back to work and you can show the bank that you're making money and that you can continue making payments, they'll work with you to get you caught up, because there's the house cost, like the value of the house versus like the amount of money they were expecting to make on the loan. As long as they're in the black, like pretty much they're going to work with you.
Yeah.
If they do the math and they're like, no, it's too much effort, they'll just scrap it and take their loss. But that whole process is not concerned with the homeowner. There's no consideration about what this person is going to do or how this is going to affect their credit. They don't care. What they're doing is they're servicing the loan on behalf of a group of investors. So there's a group of billionaires somewhere that owns your mortgage.
Yeah.
Right. They're the ones who set the rules. And then the bank says, sorry, we don't make the rules. We just have to play it their way. Yeah. And like, okay, so what the government needs to do is to step in and just say, guess what? We are on a bank holiday that started March 15th and is going until we say it's done. Banks do not do business. There is no business. That would shut everything down. That would force all the businesses to just stop. It stops this whole thing of like, oh, I have to collect my rent because I got to pay the mortgage on the building I own. That takes all that away. And the only people who are going to see any negative impact from that are going to be the billionaires who own the mortgages. Cool. And
doing pretty well.
And when things pick back up, the only thing they've lost is time. They haven't even lost any money. We just pick those mortgages up where they left off and defer the payments to the end. That's what they did in Canada. Canada doesn't care about a bunch of rich bankers. They cared about keeping people in their homes. And so all the mortgages were deferred.
I mean,
our government can't do that because the bankers are saying, well, no, there's no reason for us not to make money. You got guys like Jeff Bezos making billions on this deal because everybody's buying stuff on Amazon because they're stuck at home with nothing to do.
So the great shift in wealth is a lot of the stuff. And I'm really trying to stay away from a lot of the news and the media because it's just gotten, it's so polarized and it's not even discussions anymore. That's why I appreciate doing this type of a project where we're able to have discussions, able to, you know, view opposing views and, you know, find some middle ground or just kind of flush some ideas out. But yeah, the stuff that, you know, I am seeing is talking about shifts in wealth, like massive shifts in wealth.
Yeah.
I have friends that do have a lot of properties, you know, multi-unit properties, and suddenly you look at these small, you know, for a small investor, you know, you're talking maybe $1 million or a little bit more in property, real estate, but they've got rents that they have to, that they're using to pay the mortgages to maintain the property so it doesn't turn into a slumlord type of scenario. And suddenly now there's all these people, you know, it's just this cascading failure where it's almost like COVID was this big slow moving train wreck that was coming in. The more we learn, I think everybody's realizing maybe it's not quite the, you know, the contagion style, like wipe out a quarter of the Earth's population at all. But all the other things that are kind of coming from it now in terms of like the commercial real estate. So all these skyscrapers that are downtown, right? You can look at downtown Minneapolis, massive skyscrapers, a bunch of them unoccupied. And there's a bunch of businesses now that are going, wait a minute. So we've been able to continue business pretty much as usual for almost 6 months. We're not paying massive rent on. So like, why are we going to go back again? And our employers are happy, or our employees are happy.
Employees are happier. Yeah.
They're home with their families. They kind of have a more loose, free lifestyle. So what's like the real question is what's going to happen with these giant skyscrapers? Like and then you look at like the rioting and the crazy stuff that happened.
Yeah. Who wants to
there's a theory that, you know, society is going to transition into this, like moving away from the cities now because of technology, you know, and that to the very beginning.
And then
it's always going to be that.
Crap. Yeah. But that again, there's a cost associated. Like there's always some kind of a risk. And in my personal situation with this, like, yeah, it was a risk. The cost is not terrible. It's an inconvenience. You know what I mean? It's an inconvenience. But I mean, also looking at it there was a time before everything was digital where if I wanted to record all of this, I would have to like drive to New York, sit down with a guy, get tape recording, you know, and then maintain all this equipment to help get the recording off the tape and make it and then broadcast it. And how am I going to broadcast? Like there was so many other moving parts. And here it's like, I record it right here on my computer. I just upload it to the internet and it's all over the world.
Right. Everybody's their own public relation, PR.
So you want to move your high pressure marketing firm to a situation where, you know, everybody's in a different place. I mean, they could be all over the world. You could have one guy on top of a mountain, another guy at the bottom of the Marianas Trench. As long as they got an internet signal, they can be productive.
Yeah.
So you come up with redundancies. You come up with backup plans. You know, if you're doing something that's really, really important, like you're going to have more redundancies. You just have to plan ahead for that. And then sometimes, you know, stuff does hit the fan. You just have to have a plan to react to that. And kind of tying that to the whole COVID thing, I just don't feel like we have a plan. I feel like we have some recommendations from a largely discredited organization that's sort of like, maybe we should wear masks, and people are like, yeah, kind of, I guess, you know, like, but we don't have a plan. We don't have any leadership saying, okay, here's what we need to do. Here's step 1, step 2, step 3. They keep talking about like, oh, there's a 4-phase plan to reopen. It's like, we're still in the first wave of this, guys. We don't have an active plan for dealing with where we're at today. So I think moving away from cities, probably not the worst thing in the world. Some people love it. Most people would choose not to have their commute, you know, and think about if everybody on the planet stopped commuting, think of what that would do just environmentally, you know, the amount of carbon. So I don't know, maybe that is the wave. Maybe that's part of our way out of this. Maybe that's the shift the world is making, is that property is not worth as much as these billionaire investors think it is. And that's why they're trying to hang on to it so bad. But this idea that people are trying to hang on to the world is what's really driving this whole, we have to reopen the economy. Because like we talked about before with unemployment, the idea is to like tide you over, right? So
Sure.
my company furloughed me and said, we'll hire you back when this thing is over. Is it going to be 2 weeks? Is it going to be 3 months? Well, here we are almost 6 months into it. They're reopened. They're trying. It's like they're trying to cram a square peg into a round hole. People don't want to go to gyms right now. And
Right.
I've been seeing in the news about like gym owners who are defying orders to stay shut because, well, my business is important and I'm helping people stay healthy. And it's like, guys, you're just being arrogant at this point. Like, you don't need to physically have a location to help people be better. You know, if you want to get people fit, guess what? You have to adapt to the world around you. You know,
That's
if I don't,
you've been doing though, isn't it? You've been
but
working.
I didn't hesitate at all. It was like, okay, they sent me home. I think I remember the gym. It was like we were shut at 8 o'clock at night, and I was home by 9 o'clock that night, and I was already looking for new clients.
But you were doing some sort of, I think we talked about this before, where you're doing remote types of personal training with people.
Yeah, and honestly, and that had nothing to do with a physical location so much as it just has to do with math, right? If I want to train people in a city, okay, so let's just say, I don't even know, what's the population of Stillwater, like 35,000? Like, there's 35,000 people in the city of Stillwater. How many people have internet access?
Probably most of them.
Like a couple billion? So
I thought
if
you were talking about in the city of Stillwater.
No, I mean in the world, like billions of people are on the internet versus 35,000 here in Stillwater. Where's the bigger market?
Right.
You know what I mean? And if I can like remove some of the barriers for people and make it easy for them to get into it, like I can get a much, much larger audience using the internet. Like that just makes sense to me. So if you're a local business and you're mostly focused local and that local thing kind of gets taken away, why are you fighting to protect a market that's no longer viable? Like you just need to move on. You need to find that next opportunity because I mean, here's the thing is what does it cost you? What did it cost me to go all in on my online business? Like literally nothing.
Time.
Just time, which guess what I had? Tons of. So like, yeah, I'll just invest all this time and all this energy into this little online project I have. And my business has grown and grown and grown and grown. And now let's say the world does just reopen. Overnight, COVID just disappears and everybody's like, okay, back to work. What did it cost me to have done this? And now what
on the back end too is
well, but like what position am I in now? So my former employer decides to call me and they're like, yeah, we want you to come work for me for $8.75 an hour. And I'm like, gosh, you know, I don't really need a job that bad. Like I'm doing all right on my own. Like it changes that thing. So my goal when I started off with going all in on the online thing was twofold. Like one, I just wanted to grow my brand. I wanted to reach a larger audience and get my name out there and help as many people as I could actually help. Like I'm actually very altruistic by nature. I legitimately have not charged people for training since this thing started. It's free. Yeah. Just give what you can give. Cause I understand some people are laid off. Some people can't pay nothing. I've got college kids who are on zero income and are living off ramen noodles. I'm not going to try to nickel and dime them. Guess what? I'll train you. At least you'll have that part of your life figured out. And then later on, when you become a billionaire investor, you remember your boy, you know, like that's the deal. Yeah. Some people are like, no, I insist. Okay, great. So, I mean, in the end, I've actually been doing very well. This is not something that's sustainable for the long term, but I wanted to get out there and do that. The second thing was to put myself in a position that when things come back to, you know, some version of normal, that I'm in a better position to negotiate from because I don't want to be begging for a job. I don't want to have to take a job that's not going to pay me enough to survive just for sake of having a job. Sure. I wanted to be in a position where I can say, you know, what I was doing before had its good points and I enjoyed that. It's not what I'm looking for now. I need to be in a better position. You know, so I look at this entity that I worked for and they've really struggled. They've struggled with the reopening. They're struggling to get people to come back to a physical location. And I just found out they're actually starting like an online video coaching program. Like, why don't you talk to somebody who's been doing this for a long time and make them part of the team? And they're, oh, well, we've got people. Well, okay, great. Good luck with that. Yeah. Because now I'm your competitor. That's what you've decided is that I'm your competitor. I was like, hey, why don't you hire me to help you? Because I'm on your team, right? Because you furloughed me, you intend to hire me back, and they're not interested. So fair enough. Let's see how you do. Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest hang up for people when, you know, because I think that was one of the big controversial statements that was recently made by some political figure, I think POTUS, that said, find something different. like pretty cut and dry, maybe a little callous, but I mean,
well, look,
what is the rub with people? You know, they want that.
People are risk averse, right? Like you've got a house, you've built your life, and you're like, I'm happy where I'm at, I'm comfortable where I'm at, and I want to maintain that, right? It's sort of that conservative mindset, right? Like I want to maintain what I've built. I like my sense of security, and then that kind of gets yoinked away through no fault of your own. You were just doing your job, and now you legitimately can't.
Life
so yeah. So what are you going to do? So my point of view is, well, look, you've got risk and you've got reward, right? What are you risking right now by trying something different? Because like I said, I can work a whole bunch and fail, or I can not work and fail. Well, then I'll always choose not to work and fail, right? But I mean, if I could bust my ass and somehow break through and end up in a better position,
yeah.
I'm not risking my employment right now. They already furloughed me. They laid me off. My job, in all likelihood, is never going to be the same. So now, like, my employer has to come to me and they have to hire me again, is the way I'm looking at it. I'm not going back just because they said, hey, come on back. It's like, okay, so what's the offer? And they say, well, it's exactly what it was before. Well, that didn't work because there was one pandemic and you had to shut down for 6 months. How are you going to, like, I can't come back to the same situation. I can't have my livelihood ripped away from me a second time. What's changed? Oh, well, nothing. Okay, then great. I'll find a different job because I'm not risking anything, right?
Something that me and an associate talk about regularly in terms of being an entrepreneur or trying to that spectrum of work is escape velocity. So like trying to get off, you know, the space program, you got to get up to a certain speed and everything to get out of the atmosphere. And sometimes if you don't get going fast enough, you'll come back down to earth, right? Yeah. And so this idea of, you know, you have to have this momentum, you have to have this.
I like this metaphor because there's this concept that, like, what you're basically doing in orbit is falling, right? You're just falling really, really fast. You're falling so fast that you keep missing the edge of the earth. And so as an entrepreneur, what's our scariest moment is that sense of failing, the sense that you're falling. But like not only do you have to risk falling, you have to go all in on falling. You have to go all in on failure, and you have to reach that velocity. So I like that metaphor from both of those standpoints of, like, there's this fear of, like, getting off the ground. There's this fear of getting started. There's a fear of failure. But, like, you almost have to embrace that and jump in it. And like I said, right now, if you're sitting at home doing nothing but playing video games for a month, what are you risking by starting some kind of online business? What are you risking by, going on eBay, buying a bunch of stuff cheap, and then turning around and selling it at a slight markup on Amazon?
Man, I've actually been making a killing. I called it my COVID cleaning initiative. Mm-hmm. And basically over the last 2 months, you know, I was just kind of like, I'm going to go through my stuff because I have a bunch of gear from the last, 5-6 years of doing videography work and creative stuff. Yeah. Where I'm just like, you know what, I haven't even touched that thing, an old drone or some old lenses or whatever it is. And I just started piling all this stuff up and I'm like, I bet I could make some decent money. I have. It's crazy how much people are spending. There's something that I just sold that I made more on the resale than when I bought it years ago, like a lens. It's crazy what's going on in this digital marketplace, this space, right? And it's finding these different places, whether it's eBay or Facebook Marketplace, or there's some apps like Let Go or Let It Go.
Actually, this reminds me of a story. You remember? I tried to think of the guy's name. James Blunt sang that song "You're Beautiful." It was a while back. It was kind of like a summer hit. Oh God, I don't know, 15 years ago. But in any case, he was on.
You need to sing the chorus for me,
Joe. Beautiful. You're beautiful. I don't even know the song that well, but I remember this is when I worked in TV. I was directing the morning news, and after the morning news, then the Today Show came on. We were an NBC affiliate, and every 20 minutes during the Today Show, they would cut to the local station to do local weather. And so we were always on standby for like 2 hours. We would finish a 2-hour broadcast, and then we were on standby for 2 hours because as soon as they were like, and here's your local weather, our weatherman needed to be ready and like on. And he'd be like, hey, weather here today, blah, 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 blah. It was like a 2-minute thing. And then they'd go back to the Today Show. During one of those, while we were waiting on standby, James Blunt was on, and he was talking about how his fame had affected his life because he was kind of a nobody, lived in England, a bit of a performer, sure. And then he gets his top hit, and it's like, wow, okay, Now he's famous.
Stardom.
Now he can't walk out of his apartment without being mobbed, right? And so what he started doing as a bit of a joke was like, I wonder what I could get for this on eBay. And so he would put up like James Blunt's toothbrush and he'd get like $150 for it. And he's like, sweet. He's like, what can I get for like one of my shirts? And he'd put his shirt up and he'd sell for like $1,000. He's like, oh my God, this is great. He didn't even need the money at this point, but he's like, at a certain point, he's sitting there looking around his apartment and there's literally nothing left to sell because everything he could sell, it's like his toenail clippers was going for $50. Like, this is great. At one point, he literally sold his sister on eBay. The story goes, she had a friend in Ireland that was getting married. So she needed, and they're in London. So she just needed to fly over to Ireland. And so he was like, don't buy a ticket. I want to try something. And so he put that on his page of like, I will sell you a date with my sister. And some millionaire over in Ireland was like, sure, I'll date James Blunt's sister. And so he flew her over on his private jet and they went on a date. She went to the wedding. Like,
oh, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. So I feel like where your mind is at is it's interesting. It's like, what can I do without? What can I sell? Imagine everything just completely crashed. Let's say that the government completely goes bonkers. The federal government falls apart. State governments completely flounder. Businesses fail. The housing markets crash. Everything is junk. What are you going to do that next day? Like, what are your concerns? Yeah. My biggest concerns are like, okay, I got to feed my family, right? So I'm thinking like, well, okay, I've got a bow and arrow. I've got a gun. I can go hunting if I need to. Yeah. If I absolutely had to, I could disappear into the wilderness for any amount of time and be okay because I understand enough about hunting and gathering and survival. Like I grew up in the sticks of Wisconsin. Like I know how to clean a deer and a deer can feed my family for a week. Like we're good. Yeah. So if I had to, worst case scenario, I was never going to work again. There's turkeys in our backyard. You know what I mean? Like I'll find a way. I'm not just going to like roll over and die. But just think about it.
With chickens, bro.
But how many people, it's like, oh, well, my company just went defunct. My business failed. I guess I'm just going to sit in this chair and starve to death. I mean, like that's not really an option, folks. Not really. I mean, it's not like society is going to crumble and we're just going to find a bunch of people who starved to death in their living room because they didn't know where to get food. Like you start to find a way. You start to figure out like, do I need to go out and be a pirate and start like looting to get food? Is that sustainable?
Something too that brings a good point up is that in times of adversity, like challenging times, it'll really draw out, the true character of.
Well, but like, here's the thing: like if you've got nothing to give, right? Like, what can I do for my neighbors that would have them want to help me survive? You know what I mean? Like, is there stuff that I can do to help my neighbor who's got maybe a granary full of stuff that we can live off of for a long time?
Good at carpentry.
What can I do for this guy? Like, what are my skills? What do I offer that makes me worth keeping around? Like that's what you have to look at. So before you even get to this like apocalyptic scenario of like, what would I do if money had no value and I had to do everything by barter? Think about it. And then recognize like where your strengths are. And now it's like, well, I mean, if this is something that I have that's of value, then why can't I charge a little bit of money for this? Why can't I find a way to make it work without having to rely on somebody else's company to pay me for it? So imagine you're a dental hygienist. All right. Society fails. Do you have a skill set that people are going to want?
Without a doubt.
Yeah, without a doubt, you are a valuable person. You know what I mean? If you're a tattoo artist and society fails, do you have a service that people would be willing to invest in? Like,
I believe so.
Believe it or not, I think a tattoo artist would be okay. Yeah. You look back at all kinds of rough and tumble civilizations in the past. Vikings always had paint and tattoos and stuff. A lot of warrior nations had that kind of stuff. Like, it ain't going away. So like, there's nothing that's off the table. It's just a matter of like, what do you do? If you're a marketing manager, well, what does that mean? Like, how do you apply that to something else if the company you work for goes defunct? Like, what is that skill set in its core? And figure out like, well, I don't need somebody else to do it. Why do I have to work for another person? The only reason that we want to work for another person is because there's a sense of security.
Stability, there's a sense of security. It's like
It is.
Peace of
It
mind.
is a very, and we talked about this, right? With the hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
Like we want that bit of stability. So I'm willing to accept a salary for my services if you're investing in me as like, you're making me part of your team. We're going to do this together. Then I have that sense of security, and I'm willing to accept what you're paying for the job is the contract. But that's why I'm not going to go work for some, local coffee shop because they want to pay me $8.75 an hour. I'm not that desperate for money.
Self-worth.
And
I mean, you have a certain level of,
exactly.
yeah.
And so it's like, so as a company, well, okay, I can't hire people for $8 an hour. What about 9? What about 10? What if I gave my employees a sense of ownership? And if we're losing 10 to 20% of our business because the lines are too long, how can I incentivize these guys to find new ways? Paying them $8.75 an hour ain't going to do it. Because for that, I'm showing up brain dead. You got me from the moment my shift starts to the moment my shift ends, and I am done with you. Yeah. And I am going to do the bare minimum while I'm there for that rate. But now you tell me that I own 50% of the company. Oh, hell, I'm there early. I'm there late. I am finding every way to be more efficient because every dime that comes in that door, I get a little piece of. It's a different approach. And that's where I think the world has to shift. I think people's business mind has to shift. And it starts with people who are sitting at home. Like, okay, so you've gotten a little bit of a break. Now what?
Yeah.
At no point in your life when this thing is over, do you get to say, gosh, I wish I just had a month to do nothing. Because you've had a month to do nothing, and guess what you did?
Months.
Nothing. Yeah. So show your mettle. Like, step up and figure some stuff out, and put yourself in a better position. Go to the public library, go to their webpage, because you can download digital copies of books, and you can become a more valuable employee for when this thing opens back up. Yeah. And you can try to predict the future, and you can try to put yourself in like a position that's going to be highly desirable. But honestly, any effort to improve yourself right now is going to be worth it in the end.
I just love, and I think it's a perfect way to cap it off. I know we're getting up there in the time is, what you had mentioned with just in terms of value. What do you do that has value, that you believe has value? Because that in and of itself would suggest that it's something that you hold, near and dear. In terms of your capabilities, and then to focus some energy on that, especially if it's something that you enjoy,
Yeah.
And I think we covered a lot of great topics, and just things to consider moving forward. We have no idea what's going to happen here in the coming months, but we're
could be shutting down again, could just open up and let the chips fall where they may. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where everybody's getting to this point of like, whatever happens, but at least we're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
What is that? What is the saying from Alice in Wonderland that the Cheshire Cat, I think, says, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there.
Yep.
Love it.
Yep. Yeah. It does feel like Wonderland these days.
Yeah, it really does. But I don't know. For what it's worth, I've been enjoying it, and enjoying it in the sense of pursuing, the passion projects, and just kind of like it's really forced internalization or introspect. Mm-hmm. That it was there before, but when suddenly you're locked down, nearly incarcerated in a 300 square foot studio apartment for months on end, you really start to think some things out and say, where do I want to be in 6 months? And I'm driving for it. It sounds like you are too, Joe. Was there anything that you were hoping to touch base on that you had on your mind before?
I don't know. It's just good to vent, honestly. You do get cooped up. But yeah, I mean, I'm always willing to help people. So anything I can do to help, it costs you nothing to ask. Worst case scenario is you reach out and you say, hey, can you help me with my fitness? And I'm like, yeah, and you have to pay money for it. And then you're like, sorry, I'm broke. That's the worst conversation that we're going to have. I promise you. And like I said, I really haven't been charging people. So like, it costs you nothing to reach out and just ask. If it's just answering a few questions, happy to do that for you. If you need a little bit of hand holding, I'm happy to do that for you as well. So there you go.
We heard the man. Listeners and viewers, all the information will be down below on how you can check out what Joe's been up to, social media, website, what have you. Joe, it's always a pleasure. Thank you again for coming on the show, and tell the viewers and listeners stick around. We may or may not have more of these coming at you. There's some transitions that may be happening here in the near future, but if that happens, you'll be the first to know. So thanks again, Joe. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Micah.